Hello, 7th grade. This is Miss Reeser here. Today your assignment is Lesson 8, and this is a little bit of a longer lesson. You're reading 3 chapters, and you're also doing vocab work. So it is a longer lesson, so I'll be reading chapters 15 and 16 to you in this video, and then you'll need to read chapter 17 on your own. Something else to keep in mind, number 24 is actually extra credit. So if you want, it's not required, but if you want to do it, you'll get 1 point of extra credit, okay? So, actually, you know what, if you can write a good paragraph for number 24, it needs to be a good paragraph, I'll give you 5 points of extra credit, okay? So 5 points of extra credit for a good paragraph, alright? And that's for number 24 only. That's the only one that you can get extra credit on, alright? So, without further ado, I will read this chapter 15 to you. It was morning when the little red pickup truck brought the Penner family from the rail station in Schneithheim to the Mennonite camp in Gronau. Maria had soon learned that Schneithheim was only a meeting place and that Gronau was their destination. Enough light had trickled from the heavens to show up the outlines of the crooked old buildings hunched close to the winding streets of Gronau. But it was still early enough that the darkness I lost my place now. But it was still early enough that the shutters were closed over the windows and the quiet town was lifeless. Although Gronau was situated within 2 miles of the Dutch-German border, and the Netherlands lay only a short stretch westward, the shop windows that bordered the streets were just as sadly empty as the other store windows in post-war Germany. Holland had begun to get back on her feet, and her stores were now laden with plenty, but the border between the two countries was impassable. Maria, worn from the strain and excitement of the past few days, and now able to relax as a result of the new freedom from fear, slept during most of the journey. Hansi was securely fastened between the driver and Maria, and Rosie snuggled in her mother's lap. Only one thought marred Maria's complete enjoyment of the trip to camp. If only Hans could share her fortune. For the first hour they had talked. The driver, Waldemar Clausen, describing the camp in which he had found refuge and the kindness of the American Mennonites who had come to establish this temporary home for their people. They had talked of their homeland, their trek, their predicament as unwanted people, until Maria, in spite of her interest in their conversation, could no longer keep awake. Every now and then she awoke I'm stumbling over myself here, 7th grade. Awoke to view another mangled town, dismally void of signs of life, few scattered streetlights revealing the tragedy that had taken place only a few short years before. Bricks and rubble lay everywhere. Twisted, gnarled steelwork wrapped itself about tumble-down walls. It was a old sight to Maria. She gladly closed her eyes to the disfigured landscape and dozed again. So it was that now, after several hours of driving through peaceful countryside and bombed-out towns, they finally pulled up in front of a large villa set back discreetly from the road behind a heavy iron gate. Maria sat up with a start, suddenly aware that Herr Clausen had pulled the brake and was climbing out of his side of the truck. Smiling, he came around to the other side, opening the door for her and helping her out. "This is the headquarters building," he informed her, pointing beyond a simple wooden sign which read in bold black letters, "Mennonite Central Committee of the United States and Canada. This is where the main offices and the hospital rooms for camp are, and since no one is up at the lager yet, Frau Director has asked me to give you a bed there until later in the morning." He lifted Rosie from her lap and gave Maria his arm. Maria had not realized how exhausted she was in mind and body until she climbed from the pickup truck, stretched, and looked about her. The long kilometers she had walked, the privation she had endured, the strain from all the uncertainty of her life, the absence of her loved ones. All of these had sapped her strength and made her chronically ill. As she leaned upon Herr Clausen's arm for support, she was aware that the hospital bed was not amiss for her. For one frightening moment, the villa, the red truck, the iron fence, trees, ground, and sidewalk swirled before her eyes. After that, she was admitted to camp, assigned her bed, and cared for without even finding it out. And when she woke, it was no longer morning. Frau Penner. The voice came from a clean young face, leaning sympathetically over her bed. The journey is over, Frau Penner, and you are here at Gronau safe. Can't you take a bit of nourishment? Perhaps this soup will help. Maria looked at the woman in the freshly laundered uniform. She glanced at the other women in the freshly laundered uniform. She glanced at the other heels and the other beds in the room, complete with mattresses and sheets. Sunshine blessed her from the window, and the words directed to her were spoken in Platt Deutsch, the beloved dialect of her people. She took a sip of the pungent soup extended toward her. Safe? She wiped tears that marred her view of the face. She liked the strength of it. To her surprise, the bright eyes above the bowl were also filled with tears. Yes, Frau Penner, safe among friends. But Hansi and Rosie, where are they? She sat up in bed, then lay back against the pillow, looking squarely at the girl. I left them with the driver, Herr Clausen. Did they also get soup? I can't eat if they're hungry. It's all right, Frau Penner. They were fed this morning when you arrived, and again at noon, and soon they will be given their supper. You were too weak, too tired even to eat. After you have eaten this soup and bun, the doctor will come in to examine you, and then the children will be brought up before they are put to bed. Then the children were safe. She was safe. The Lord thy God will be with thee, whithersoever thou goest. He was with me, she murmured. She did not eat the bun, but lay back again, falling into another deep sleep. Maria would always remember that evening. The children, fed, rested, bathed, and dressed in warm new clothes, stood by her bedside, chattering about the room they shared with another small family, a room separated from their neighbors by blanket walls. Hansi told her of the many people he had seen in the camp, the little boy who lived in their room, the soup line he had stood in, and many other details that impressed his mind. Rosie displayed her new clothes that the nice lady had given her and insisted that Hansi hold up his foot so Mama could see the splendid socks he was wearing. And the shoes! Hans blinked back tears when he showed his mother the shoes, so well-fitting, so long overdue. Actually, Maria heard very little of what the children said as they leaned over her bed, their faces hungry for her companionship, their hands lovingly touching hers above the sheets. She knew only that her children were finally being cared for in a way that she, their mother, had longed to do for many years. They heard heavy footsteps come down the hall, and looking up, saw a young man enter the room. Tall and broad-shouldered, he had an air of confidence about him. I represent the Mennonite Central Committee, and I believe you are Frau Penner, he said in easy flowing Platt. We are so happy that you arrived safely. And she knew from the way he said it that he meant it. When you are feeling better, I want to hear all about your trip and many other things. But in the meantime, the doctor says you are to take it pretty easy for a while. How do you feel this evening? Much, much better, Maria answered with difficulty, trying to swallow the lump in her throat. You are so very kind. I don't know how to thank you. God has been good to us in Canada. My parents made the long trip from Russia after the revolution in 1925. I was only 5 then, but I can still remember a little about the trip. We have been so blessed ourselves to have a debt to pay to our brethren. Our only desire is to help as many of our brothers and sisters as we possibly can. He spoke with conviction. But how did you in Canada, so far away, find out about us? The young man frowned, formulating his reply, then his face brightened. As I said, Frau Penner, we have been greatly blessed in the United States and Canada. Most of us are far from rich, but we are not in need. Our homes have not been destroyed, nor our loved ones taken from us. Maybe the emblem on my sleeve will help me tell the story. Hansi, who had been listening to the new friend with keen interest, moved closer to see the colorful emblem sewed neatly on the sleeve of his gray suit. A cross embroidered in yellow against a red background, encircled by the words Mennonite Central Committee Relief. In the foreground were two hands clasped in a warm handshake. Because of the love of God for us, because of his gift to us in the person of Jesus Christ, he continued, we Mennonites in America united to give help and relief to those whose lives were disrupted in the past dreadful war. We give this witness to everyone in need, regardless of race or creed, but we did not dream that we would discover thousands of our own brethren in the faith scattered and stranded throughout Western Europe. How we thank God every day that we can help them too. It is truly an act of God's hand. We deserve no credit. But you will be rewarded. Maria longed to say much more, but the wonder of God's providence saturated her being and made talking impossible. The young man smiled. We are being rewarded now, more than you can know, and far more than we deserve. He rose to go. I think I'd better take the children back to their room at the logger now. You need rest. Obediently, Hansi strode over to the man and stood waiting to return to his new home. But Rosie, stifling a sob, threw herself against her mother and buried her face in the sheet. Rosie, dear, what is wrong? We're here with friends, safe at last, and a warm bed is waiting for you. How much better that would be, she thought, than the unfriendly hard cement floor that had been the children's bed last night in the Schneefheim train station. I want to ask just one more thing before we go, Mama, Rosie finally said when she had recovered her voice. Is it really true that we don't need to be afraid anymore? Right, I'm going to pause and get a drink here. All right, and we will go to Chapter 16. Maria gave the third cot a gentle pat and stood back to observe the room. Everything was in order. Beds were made, clothes hung neatly, the rough tables and the only chair dusted, and Rosie's little bouquet of wildflowers nicely arranged in the center of the table. Now, if they could just make something pretty to put on the wall. Maybe she had better rest before the children came in from doing their morning exercises, or she wouldn't be able to go with them on that tour she had promised. She'd had no idea she would get so tired from doing so little. Why, nothing more than making the beds and tidying up their little cubicle had left her almost shaky. Small wonder the camp doctor had decreed that she rest the first week out of the hospital. After all you went through before you came to camp here at Gronau, and after lying in bed 6 months, you'd better take it a little easy for a while, and you'll be right back in this sick ward, he had commanded sternly, then softened the order with the characteristic humor. We don't want you back again. There aren't enough beds. But idle hands are the devil's workshop, she had objected. I don't think the devil would get much done if he had to depend on your workshop. The doctor had shot back at her. Besides, if you run out of things to do for your own little ones, there's a nest full of motherless souls down the corridor from you. Hair fast, children. And there are some older ladies who need someone to talk to. But now, mind you, don't overdo, even visiting for the first week. She had promised that she wouldn't, for the privilege of being with her children again was one she had no intention of forfeiting. It had been hard staying in bed those first 6 months after they had arrived at Gronau, trying to recuperate, seeing the children only once a day when they came home from school. And still harder was the fact that the MCC workers had been unable to locate Hans, even though they had found many other Mennonites scattered throughout Western Germany since Maria had come to camp. Periodically, Maria had sent the children to the office to check, but the answer was always the same. But yesterday was a day none of them would ever forget, for Maria had been officially released from the hospital and outfitted with new clothes from the MCC. With a little assistance, she had actually walked home. "Come, Mama, hurry, or we won't have time to show you around before study hour." It was Hansi whose voice broke into Maria's thoughts. Looking up, she saw the children push excitedly through the blanket door into their room. They each grabbed an arm, almost lifting her off her feet. The little blanket-enclosed space in which the Penners lived was only one of the many such tiny rooms in the auditorium-sized clubhouse, a large dingy building once used by the town people for a recreation hall. In order to give each refugee family a bit of privacy, the MCC had partitioned these cubicles by hanging blankets over strung wires. Maria had been given a quota of 4 blankets for each member of her family, enough to partition off their area from the rest and to make a cot for each of them. A network of convenient pathways forming little streets zigzagged through the maze of family units. The refugees had named each street after an MCC worker or some other person in camp they respected. The children raced ahead, waiting now and then for Maria's slow legs to catch up. They had so many things to show her: the kitchen, the laundry, the shoemaker's shop, the shower room. They paused for a moment outside the veranda to watch a group of mothers settle around tubs of water to peel potatoes, visiting together as they worked. Children chased one another across the bare space that was their only playground, bent on having a little last-minute fun before their mothers ushered them into their rooms for morning study. Everywhere they went, a pleasant hum of voices and signs of early morning industry mixed with the delightful April sunshine. At last they had seen almost everything, and circling the clubhouse, they entered the front door. Maria was glad the tour was over. It was time to get off her feet. "But we didn't show Mother the window where we get our rations or the office upstairs where we get our identification card," Rosie exclaimed, disappointed. "It's time Mama gets back to bed," Hansi ordered, and Maria looked at him with fresh surprise. She sighed as she stretched out on the bottom cot they had designated for her. "Now, children, it's just about 9 o'clock. Time for study. If you need any drinks of water, Hansi, go and get them." Now, while she lay in bed, she had heard complaints about Hansi. Sometimes he was seen dashing around the halls during study hours. Of course, after questioning him, she was always assured that he had some important errand. The children sat at the table, spread out their few materials: a testament, a pencil, and a notebook for each child. Because of the scarcity of textbooks, assignments were carefully copied by the students in their notebooks. So 7th grade, if you think writing cursive is bad, imagine writing out all your lessons. Hansi was working at his arithmetic problem. Rosie painstakingly copied a verse from her testament. "Now, where did you say you got those lovely testaments?" Maria whispered, for she was fast learning that anything above a whisper was easily overheard. "Some Sunday school class in Canada sent them, Mama. From our dear brothers and sisters in the Lord, our teacher told us." Rosie's voice rose louder than it should have, and Maria held a finger to her lips. "Do you think we'll hear from our relatives in Canada sometime like the Edgars did, Mama?" Rosie lowered her voice, fiddling with her braid and looking wistful. "They got a box, and Rita told me it had all kinds of things. Chocolate, and a dress for her, and some coffee that Rita's mom traded downtown for a pair of glasses. Oh my, I wish our relatives would send us a box." "Shh!" Maria felt ashamed. "Don't let anyone hear you talk like that, as though God hasn't been good enough to us to bring us here, to make me well, and to give us such beautiful clothes. Shame on you, Rosie." "Yes, you ought to be ashamed. Don't let us hear you say anything like that again," Hansi inserted. "You stop telling me what to do." "Children!" How long Maria slept she didn't know, but when she awoke, Hansi had gone to wash for dinner. Maria walked toward the women's washroom, feeling respectable again, like a real mother in a real home. She looked down and fingered the lovely print dress that had come in with a shipment of clothing from America and had been fitted on her only yesterday. What an improvement it was over the hospital gown she had to wear so long. God bless whoever sent this dress, she murmured, wondering what the donor looked like and whether she was rich or had given out of the little she had. Oops, I'm sorry, lady. I didn't see you coming around that corner. That's all right. I wasn't looking where I was going. I guess I was daydreaming. She stared at the young man who was bowing and making apologies for running into her. That face! Wasn't that the same boy who had reminded her of someone before? Whom did he resemble, and why did he look at her so oddly, then turn away as if he almost recognized her? Should she call him back? Apologies made, he had turned to go again. Just a minute, son. Would you mind if I ask who you are? You look so familiar. You mean you feel that way too? He laughed. My name's Franz Goddard. And again, I'm not sure what the correct pronunciation of that is. And I'm from Alexanderwohl. She felt her eyes filling with tears. Then it was Gisela's son. Your mother, Gisela Hubert Getter? Do you remember her cousin, Maria Penner, or were you too young to remember? He laid his hand on her arm. Cousin Maria, of course I do. I'm on my way back to the factory now, but I'll drop in this evening for a chat. Tell you what, I'll bring my supper over and eat it with you. How wonderful! But Franz, she hesitated, but she had to ask. Just one more thing. Are any of your folks alive? The boy kicked an imaginary something with his foot and tried to give the information as he would cold statistics. Mom, Siberia. Dad died before I left. Sister, Elizabeth, married, widowed, and now in the MCC camp in Black Nang. She might come here later. The rest, well, you know the story. Only God knows where they are. Their eyes looked for what seemed a long moment. Then, embarrassed, the boy turned to go. I do hope Elizabeth can come. So do I, he grinned. Don't forget, company for supper. She watched him hurrying down this narrow aisle, one hand in his pocket, his tall, sturdy frame seemingly confident. He had a way about him that gave the impression he was very sure of himself, almost indifferent to the tragedies that made up his past. But in the moment when their eyes had met, Maria had seen the same frightened little boy she had known only a few years before. How strange that she hadn't known him at first sight that day he had looked into her hospital room. Trouble might come double, but blessings do too, Maria thought as she gathered up her dinnerware and joined her children in the line. She still had not gotten over the surprise of finding Elfrida, a charming girl who had also received spiritual help from the minister at Stone City. Elfrida was doing stenographic work at the immigration office of the MCC. Now, Franz had made complete her first day out of the hospital, for he too was a human tie between her old world and her new. Hansi needed the companionship of an older boy, and she needed the reassurance of Franz's smiling personality. But, more than anything else, Franz symbolized to Maria hope. The hope of finding someone far dearer to her than her cousin's son. Alright, I'm going to stop with that. You can read chapter 17 on your own, and I will see you tomorrow, 7th grade.